We're back, and we are continuing a conversation with one of the most formidable men I know. His name is Congressman Chris Stewart of Utah. He is, among other things, a distinguished veteran of the United States Air Force and also a very impressive member of the House Intelligence Committee, where he has taken a particular interest in some of the most important challenges we're facing, including from Communist China. And I want to come back to that in a moment, sir. But just to talk one more moment about the Biden affair, the extent to which even Democrats now, it seems, have come to the conclusion he has got to go. What are the implications of that? Nobody, I think, on either side of the aisle has much of an appetite for Vice President Kamala Harris fleeting up to become the president. But what it will do is create an opening for another official, the new vice president. She will make the pick, and the appointment will go to the Congress for approval. But can you talk a little bit about why it matters so much that we actually have somebody of, well, I'd say, a caliber that has a real record in national security in the kind of dangerous world we find ourselves in, and a robust position at that?
Well, and we would hope that would, that individual, if we come to that point, would have that kind of background of that interest, because it's very clear that our vice president doesn't. And she makes that more and more clear every foreign visit that she has. And, Frank, I'm actually really torn on this, as I think most Americans are. What's worse for our country? To have an inept president who has, as we've said, entanglements overseas that we clearly have to understand, and that perhaps have put him in a position where he's not doing what is in the best interest of his own country. And the southern border and inflation in Afghanistan, and the list goes on and on. Is that worse, or is it worse to go through the national strain of having him not in office? And then the uncertainty that follows after that. And both of them are dismal catastrophes for our nation. And it's not something that anyone savors, I don't think, especially after we saw these just ridiculous impeachment proceedings against the former president. And one of my great concerns at that time was we lower the threshold for impeachment. We lower it to such a point that any president who has an opposition party in control of the House is likely to impeach for one thing or another. I don't think that's a good idea. We shouldn't have done that. But we are faced now with a situation that is very different and much more serious. And as you said, even some of our Democratic colleagues are looking at the future, and they're wondering, how in the world do we navigate through this with some of the new information we have regarding the president? None of us savor the future, but it is what it is. And I hope that if there is a new vice president, that there is someone that we can trust, someone who actually understands the threats, someone who understands the military and intelligence and putting America first, because this administration simply hasn't done that and doesn't seem to be capable of doing that.
Yeah, it's so true. Nobody, as I say, relishes this Hobson's choice, and unfortunately, it's one of the legacies of the Joe Biden candidacy, is that he picked somebody who was so manifestly inadequate to the task of actually serving as the president. I do worry, and I mentioned Tucker Carlson having this very powerful program last night in which he talked about the Democrats bailing out. One of the things that he also showed, which is among the most gripping piece of footage I've ever seen, certainly in a political sense, and that was Joe Biden not simply being ignored by Barack Obama and Vice President Harris in a scrum, a gathering, an event at the White House yesterday, but actually being shunned. And the image that came across to me, honestly, was an answer to the question that I think has had a lot of us wondering about who's actually running the country. And it may well be that it's Barack Obama. And that makes me think it's important that this change take place and we see some new entrant who is a counterweight to the kinds of predilections of these very, very radical leftists like Obama and Harris, for that matter. Let me turn to another issue, if I can, with you. You have legislation, speaking of Tucker Carlson, you had a feature with him the other day about it, that is going after something of huge moment, Congressman Chris Stewart, and that is the weaponization of our national security agencies against the American people. Talk about the problem, if you would, and the solution you're proposing.
Again, thanks, Frank, for giving us a chance to talk about this. It's very, very important the American people know what's happening. And if they know, they should be, and I think they will be, just enraged by it. We have agencies that have been given enormous power. And I mean power in the sense of legislatively and what they have the ability to do, and also power in the sense of technologically, their ability to capture through technology very secure private communications, whether it's text, emails, or voice communications, and the list is long of what they're able to do. They've been given this enormous power because we needed to use that against our adversaries, against foreign terrorists, for example, against ISIS, against terrorist organizations in Iraq and Afghanistan, against nation states, Russia, China, the mullahs in Iran, North Korea, etc. They were never intended to be used against the American people until this administration comes along. And they said something that's just frankly ridiculous. And that is, in their appraisal, one of the greatest threats facing our country is not, again, Russia or China or terrorism. One of the greatest threats facing our country in their minds is white supremacy. It's what they call DVEs, domestic violent extremism. Well, again, I reject that notion. I think that is a problem, but to say it's to the scope that they've said, I think is nonsense. But then they use that as a justification for saying, well, the threat of American terrorism, domestic terrorism, is so great that we now have to use the CIA or the NSA or the DIA or others against U.S. persons to counter this threat. We should never, ever allow that. And this legislation is designed to redefine some of the executive orders that they have, frankly, twisted to their benefit to bring back that clarity, saying you will not use the intelligence community to look at U.S. persons. That's the job of law enforcement. And for them to do that, they should get a court order. And if the court allows them to, that's okay. If the FBI or local law enforcement, you will not use the intelligence community to do that. And again, I think it's just critical. I use this phrase, but I don't think it's an exaggeration. We do not want to create an American KGB. And we've already walked down that road way too far. And it's time to pull back. It's time to try to restore trust so the American people aren't suspicious of their own agencies. And you use that, you break that faith between the American people and, once again, law enforcement, Department of Justice, or now the CIA or NSA, it's just extraordinarily destructive to a republic when you've broken that faith.
It certainly is, and I think you're right. We've seen that faith broken. I've just heard a chilling report on what's been done to individuals accused of, trespassing, basically, in connection with the January 6th events. And it sounds an awful lot like the KGB is running the place if you really drill down on punishment without trial, the extent to which people are being held in solitary confinement and deprived of medicine that they need, and on and on. It's torture in a way, and it's also a real threat to our country. So I salute you for your leadership on this point. And again, it underscores what you said earlier, Congressman Chris Stewart, and that is, what's at stake in this election coming up this fall? If there is not a turnabout, if there is not a course correction, our country is truly imperiled, because these kinds of institutional changes, what again, Barack Obama has called the fundamental transformation of our country, are very, very far advanced and are very hard to turn around. And in the minority, you have a very limited ability to make a change, particularly in such an important course correction. And Congressman, I'm sorry, we are out of time, and I want to talk to you for another hour, but we're going to have to postpone that to another day soon, I hope. Thank you, Congressman Chris Stewart, for your great work in the United States Congress.